The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified.
UFO classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, good evening, my friends, and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes, and I'm so happy that my power is on today. I apologize profusely for doing a replay last week, but we had a massive power outage here in Utah, and I was very sad that I couldn't bring my dear friend Nick Redfern on, but he has graciously agreed to spend another Friday night waiting and doing the show. We've got so much to talk about. I have to say that he is one of my favorite people in the world. He is such a great researcher and a good friend. But first, before we get Nick on, I want to tell you a little bit about my excitement, because you know me, it's never a dull moment in my world. I went to Boulder, Colorado a week ago, and I had the pleasure of meeting George Norrie for the first time and doing his TV show Beyond Belief. It was a lot of fun. They were incredible to me. They put me up in a beautiful hotel called the Boulderado that's haunted and just gorgeous. I was posting pictures of it on Facebook, and I had a great dinner. I had scallops and oysters by myself and read my UFO books. It was a total nerd fest, but I had a wonderful time. And the 45-minute interview with George went by way too quickly, but I hope to do it again. It was a great time. I was also asked to speak at the International UFO Congress, which is huge. If any of you know anything about conferences, that is, I think, one of the premier events in the world. They do such a great job. Alejandro Rojas has been a big supporter of mine, and I can't thank him enough for this wonderful opportunity. That will be next February, and of course I'll be talking about that for some time. I also have my very first speaking engagement coming up in New Mexico. It's October 22nd in Rio Rancho, and it's the New Mexico UFO Conference. It will be great. And then in Laughlin, Nevada on November 11th for Paula Harris, her Star Works Symposium. So that will be great. I've got 3 wonderful engagements. I'm going to be talking about my case that I investigated with the help of my friend, Jeff Cox, and that is the American Airlines case. It is a wonderful case that everyone needs to know about, and probably one of the best cases we've really seen in a long time. I'm not just bragging, but it is. I mean, with the radar data and the audio data, an exceptional case. And they will also be talking about that at the MUFON Symposium this year because it just made the top 10 cases of the year for MUFON. That's great. I also will be talking at the International UFO Congress about my research project on the orb phenomenon. I've been doing a lot of research as of late and talking to more and more people about these mysterious balls of light that are seen in specific locations all over the world. I will be asking my guest tonight about those because we've had several conversations about the orbs and their interesting circumstances of when people see them. But my guest tonight, we've got to get him on because I can't wait. So Nick Redfern, not only is he a really, really cool guy, fun to hang out with, he is the most prolific writer I think that I've ever met in my life. And I don't know how he does it because his research is really flawless. He is a full-time writer, a lecturer, a journalist. He writes a wide range of unsolved mysteries, and they include Bigfoot, UFOs, the Loch Ness Monster, alien encounters, government conspiracies. He has written 33 books, probably more than that by now, including The Men in Black, the zombie book for Nobody's Eyes Only, Final Events, Secret History, Monster Files, The World's Weirdest Places. It's never ending, and they are all amazing. His brand new book called Women in Black, The Creepy Companions of the Mysterious Men in Black. This is really awesome. He sent it to me, and he wrote a little note in the very front that says, "To Erica, watch out for women in black." I love that. It's so cool. I love it. And this is a great book. So you can find that on Amazon. And then also check out Nick's really, really cool blogspot. He's always writing fun stuff at nickredfern40.blogspot.com. Without further ado, my fabulous friend, Mr. Redfern, are you staying out of trouble?
No, but that's another story.
Well, that's a story that we might have to start with, actually.
Oh, I'm always in trouble one way or the other. But of all days possible, it's like 100 degrees here right now, and of all days possible, my air conditioning in the car stopped working. So
oh, my gosh.
I have no air conditioning, so I've got to get that taken care of. But so I don't get in the car right now, otherwise I'll probably pass out from heat stroke when I've barely gone a mile or whatever, you know.
Oh. Wow, it's really hot here today too. I was just like, oh, it's just one of those things. But I tell you, and that really stinks with that air conditioning. That's not a lot of fun.
It wouldn't be so bad if it had been like December or something, you know, but not middle of July in Texas. So it's gonna have to wait a while, though. I got bills to pay.
Oh, jeez. Well, with all your new books that you've got that have come out, I mean, my gosh, and your latest book is so cool.
Oh, well, thanks.
What else are you working on right now?
Well, you mentioned in the intro about one of my interests being the Loch Ness Monster, and I've got a book out about the Loch Ness Monster in September. That's through Llewellyn Books, who published my Chupacabra road trip book last year. And I've also got one which comes out also in September. It's called The Monster Book. It's like an A to Z of everything to do with strange creatures. So, you know, you've got things like B for Bigfoot, S for Skinwalkers, Y for Yeti, C for Chupacabra. But there's a sort of 200 entries, but most of them I've sort of tried to keep fairly obscure, you know, rather than just going over the typical ones that everybody talks about and everybody knows about. You know, I thought it'd be better for the readers to sort of get exposed to 150, 160 really weird and creepy creatures that a lot of people probably haven't heard of. So.
Wow. How do you get these ideas?
Well, I guess I try and sort of put myself in the position that the readers are in, you know, because as well as writing books, I read books as well. So the main thing I sort of focus on when I'm writing a new book or thinking about writing a new book is what can I add that I haven't done before, and more importantly, that somebody else hasn't done before. And that was kind of the situation, hopefully, you know, that I do with all the books. And, you know, with the new book, Women in Black, I mean, yeah, there's been books written on the Men in Black, but nobody's ever done a book on the Women in Black. So, in other words, I always try and come up with something that hopefully is new in terms of information and also value for money in the sense that, you know, people aren't going to read something that's just sort of recycled from 10 other books, you know, which isn't really giving any value for money at all when people do that. So.
You know, I love looking at your books. In fact, I'm always reading them when I'm on a road trip, and they're so great. And the way that you write, you're so eloquent and descriptive, and it really captures people's imagination. It's not that kind of dry technical stuff that you can get into when you research UFO stuff.
Well, you know, I mean, I appreciate that because, you know, I always try and make a book not just informative, but you sort of entertaining as well. I mean, you know, you could get a book where you've got all the information you might need on Bigfoot, but if it reads like Bigfoot is a giant ape, Bigfoot lives in the woods, Bigfoot has red eyes, you know. you'll be falling asleep within 5 minutes, so you've got to keep it entertaining for the reader as well. That's why, you know, I sort of write my books in two ways. They're the ones which, like Women in Black, is a straightforward study of the facts, but you still try and keep it in an entertaining and sort of atmospheric way of writing. And then there's my other books, which mainly my cryptozoology books, which I write in the style of when I go on expeditions and road trips looking for these things. I write the books in that style, you know, like a diary format, sort of. It was a dark and stormy night, you know, and I jumped in the car and spun the wheels and headed off looking for Bigfoot, that kind of thing. So yeah, I like to sort of write in different ways depending on the subject and how I investigated it. So.
That's so cool. Were you always imaginative as a child?
Yeah, I guess I was. You know, when I was a little kid, I used to like reading, you know, ghost stories and things like that. You know, when the other kids were sort of reading British equivalents of the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew, you know. In England, we had what was called the Famous Five and the Secret Seven, which are these gangs of little kids that would solve crimes, you know. But instead of reading them, when I was sort of 7 or 8, I was reading, I don't know, Edgar Allan Poe and stuff, you know. You know,
now,
stories about sort of ghouls breaking into people's homes and, you know, ripping them apart. Of course, my parents didn't know about that, but I got the book somehow or other, you know. So.
You know, so you've always
I wasn't
had
really that. I wasn't that weird. I was just kind of I just like sort of gothic, ghostly horror stories. You know, that was H.P. Lovecraft, things like that. That's what I enjoyed. So.
You know what? I actually did too, and I used to read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, and it was just fascinating to me. And I always loved, you know, vampire tales and just lots of Anne Rice. I mean, just really kind of dark and ominous stuff. But it's always intrigued me.
I guess, you know, that's a good thing. You know, you sort of start early, and you sort of, you know, you sort of go through your life. You obviously, you know, you change and you age, etc. But that sort of interest always stays with you. But I guess I've always been a little bit abnormal, so and I didn't mean that as like an insult to me. You know, it's kind of like when I was about 12 or 9 or 10, I joined the Scouts, you know, that you have over here.
Oh dear.
And I actually got thrown out in the second week because I refused to wear this, like the khaki shorts and shirt, and they wouldn't let me dress in black, you know. So I quit, and then my mum and dad told me off, you know, you walked out of the Scouts. I was like, well, yeah, I've got to wear this funny hat and these weird shorts and whatever, and I wanted to be like wear a black T-shirt and my Converse All-Stars, you know. So
did your dad take a picture of you?
What's that?
Did your dad take a picture of you in your Scout uniform?
Well, if he did, I hope it doesn't still exist. So.
That is good blackmail material. I told you I was going to stop by and see your dad when I'm over in England,
yeah.
So maybe I'll have to hit him up.
Tons of photographs somewhere, some really embarrassing, which I would never put online. Another one of somewhere I'm wearing like a little. I'm like 5 and I'm on like a rocking horse. No, I'm less than that. Like I'm about 3 on a rocking horse, and I'm wearing like this stupid bow tie. And I'm just, you can tell even at that age, I was just scowling at the camera like a little Damien or something, you know.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite movies, I have to say, The Omen is always one of my favorites. Oh my gosh. Well, I can't wait to get some blackmail material. That's all I can say. And I cannot wait. And I just have to say my show, not last week, but the week before, I had a very naughty prank caller who was my daughter. And she had a very surprisingly good English accent. And I have formulated a plan. Well, actually, Nick came up with this. And Nick is going to be pranking her. Tell us what you're going to do to her.
I'm going to pretend to be a British official who doesn't take lightly to the fact that she poked fun at the English accent, and we may have to send an agent around to interview
her. You know, I am really excited about that. I
won't scare her too much, though. We don't want to pass it out at the other end of the phone or nothing like that.
You know, we kind of do. Yeah, we actually do. She is my child, so she can handle it. That is so awesome. But we have all my friends are in the chat room tonight, and we have some questions that are coming in, and so I just want to talk about this. Ask you a question really quick. But do people contact you sometimes with inside information, and if they do, are they concerned that Big Brother is watching them if they contact you?
Well, I've got to be honest, that actually doesn't happen. The closest that does happen is that, and quite often, sort of elderly retired military people will contact me about their UFO experiences, that kind of thing, sort of, when I was 30, I was working at this particular airbase and we had this encounter, and this was like July 56 or something like that. I get a lot of stories like that where sort of retired elderly people share their accounts. And of course, in relation to stuff like Bigfoot and the Men in Black, I get dozens of stories. I get Men in Black stuff like 3 or 4 a week. But in terms of specifically what the question was about, no, I don't get sort of Edward Snowden types turn up on the doorstep, with boxes of material or something like that. Nobody says, meet me at the local parking lot at midnight. No, that doesn't happen. So.
Well, that's kind of a bummer. In my UFO,
lots of things happens, but it doesn't. It's probably the weirdest stuff I get and do is probably when I'm on the road doing cryptozoology investigations. Like if I fly off to Puerto Rico to look for the chupacabra. That I've had a few sort of dicey situations there. And so, but that, that's all part of the fun of it. But in terms of, no, I've never had somebody who is like in the employ of the government who, actively in the employ of the government who said, well, like an Edward Snowden type, that has not happened now. So.
Oh, darn it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but, sometimes, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, when you get I've been investigating cases, and there have been times where it's like, okay, meet in a parking lot, and I can only tell you so much, and and it's quite intriguing. And then you have to make sure, especially for me being a woman, that you're safe and people know where you are. But sometimes there is a little bit of mystery and suspense. But
oh, well, I should stress that has happened in the sense that I have been in a position where somebody has said, can you meet me in this restaurant? I want to talk to you about things. But as I said, this has been people who are largely, not largely, but exclusively retired, where they have been in some cases, like in several I can think of, when they're in their early 80s, and they wanted to talk about things that they did in relation to UFOs when they were in the military in the 50s, when they were like 31, 32 or whatever. So in that sense, that has happened. But I think from when you read the question, I think the person was asking more along the lines of current people, and that's the big difference. But I have been in quite a few situations like that where someone said, can you drive down to Houston or whatever, and I'd like to share something that I don't want to talk about over the phone, which happened in 1961 or whatever. That's happened a lot. Yeah.
Interesting. It's surprising to see how tentative people are, hesitant they are when they're talking about this stuff, especially like you were saying, kind of the older generation. They were so ridiculed about stuff like this, and in the case of some witnesses, they were threatened with their jobs, and that's really frightening.
I think what happens is that, and I can understand it, and it could be quite justified, is that people do worry that if they were involved in something that had an effect on national security, then even 50 years later, they could cause themselves some problems. But I always tell people that if you look at the official statements of the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book when they closed it down, the official statement actually states that no UFO report ever investigated has compromised national security. So, in other words, you can't have it both ways. Either it's a national security issue or it isn't, and the official line is it isn't. So that often makes people feel a lot more comfortable when, they see that the the stance of Blue Book was that, that there's nothing here of a national security nature. And then, so in other words, it would be, I think, be very difficult to prosecute someone in court for revealing UFO. I mean, if theoretically, if there's an entire museum or building filled with classified files on UFOs, if someone were to release them, and the official stance is no UFO sighting or report has ever compromised national security, I'm not sure to what extent that case could be successfully brought, because you're trying to prosecute someone in relation to a subject which you're saying has no bearing on the safety of the nation and national security. So.
Interesting. Well, I think things have definitely changed, and now you've got different, as you know, different governments looking into this and researching UFOs. It's an interesting time that we're living in. Do you ever feel, though, that we've got another question here from Jeff, do you ever feel like you're being monitored?
Oh, I know I am. I can tell you what, for sure I am. But I mean, I think what it comes down to is that I think pretty much everybody in the subject is, because anybody in today's world, and to some degree you can understand it, anybody in today's world who asks questions about government secrecy is probably at the very least going to be at least tangentially watched in terms of there's going to be some sort of investigation or look at the person, and even if it's just a brief one to see what they're doing, etc. But I've been on a couple of occasions I don't mind telling you this, sort of visited by CIA, for example, contractors who wanted to chat with me, not from any sinister perspective. They just wanted to chat and talk about stuff, and that's happened a couple of times. Nothing, I should stress, nothing that compromises national security, but they wanted to share their concepts and ideas in relation to UFOs, stuff that they'd investigated personally and officially. And I've had a lot of weird phone call stuff go on, which I think is done as intimidation, but I'm not the right person to intimidate, because I don't take intimidation.
No, I would never think that.
But that has happened where, I've got some really weird calls, which, there'll be sort of really convoluted stories, tell ages to tell, but which have led me to believe that there's no doubt, that I know that I'm being watched. But I don't think it's because I'm seen as a threat. I think it's done because, actually it could be for several reasons. There could be people listening in because they're within government and they know that there's some secret agency that is hiding all this, and they're trying to find out who it is, but even they can't find out. I've said this before, whereas I don't think the real deep and dark, maybe, UFO secrets are held by the CIA or the Pentagon. It's more likely by one of these what are called special access programs, or SAPs, where unless you've got the golden key, you don't get in. And, it's kind of like a situation of a mini-government hidden within the government. So I think some of the surveillance is done because there are people in government that legitimately don't know what's going on, but they want to find out. So they listen to everybody in the hope it might sort of help them open the door, which kind of sounds odd or bizarre when you think the government doesn't know what the government knows, or at least people within the government don't know, and they're trying to find out. Then, of course, you have people who probably are concerned that one day some old-timer's going to come forward with a box full of papers that he took from Roswell in 47 and kept quiet because he basically stole them. I do think that is probably one of the big nightmares that keeps them awake at night. The idea that they think they've got all the files wrapped up from 47, not realizing that, somebody smuggled out 50 pages of an autopsy report and one day decides to reveal it,
I've got to cut you off right there. We're going to talk about this when we get back and much, much more. I'm Erica Lukes. This is UFO Classified, and we will talk to you in a couple minutes.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this. Where'd that shot come from? Alpha 3 to Eagle 1. We've got company.
From Tate Publishing, codename Eagle Force, the saga begins.
I see them, Alpha 3. All units stay low and let them come.
From the eyes of a special ops officer, Joe Michael Riggy brings to life this amazing story of survival, the unknown and the unexpected.
Here they come. Hold your fire. Hold. Now.
Codename Eagle Force at TatePublishing.com.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
What if maintaining a healthy weight was as simple as drinking a cup of coffee? With Valentis coffee, it's that easy. Harvested from the world's most pristine coffee farms and packed with the purest ingredients on earth, Valentis takes losing weight to a completely new level. At Valentis, we believe everyone deserves a chance to be healthy and fit. It's pure, natural, healthy, and delicious. Click the Valentis Healthiest Coffee banner on the KCOR Digital Radio Network website and take the Weight Loss Guarantee Challenge. Valentis Coffee, simply the world's healthiest coffee.
When danger is imminent, will you be prepared? Now many mobile devices can bring you critical information from local sources you trust. With the unique sound and vibration, wireless emergency alerts keep you in the know wherever you are. Learn more at ready.gov/alerts. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific.
For Hyperspace.
The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven.
Solaris Blue Raven.
Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride? Take a ride.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday, everyone. I am always happy to be here. Thanks to all my great friends in the chat room and to all my listeners worldwide for taking the time out of your Friday night and learning about our world and what's going on, all of the mysteries. And I have such a great time doing this, and it's a pleasure to know that you're all there and keeping track of me, which is a tough job. Just ask my husband. I am here with Nick Redfern, who is a good friend and a mentor, and he and I have nice long chats about a lot of different things, including Women in Black, which is his new book, Women in Black, The Creepy Companions of the Mysterious Men in Black. And this is really awesome. You can pick it up on Amazon, so get it. It's a great book. Just so many. I had no idea, Nick, that these elusive kind of, they're really creepy creatures were so, I mean, there's a lot of, I'm just surprised. That's all I can say.
Well, I guess the only reason I wrote the book, or I should say the only reason I was able to write the book, is because, I've done 3 books previously on the Men in Black. And I guess it's like anybody who writes on any subject, people who've had their own experiences, they contact you. If somebody writes a book about haunted houses, people contact them to say, hey, I've got a haunted house, that kind of thing. And it's sort of the same with me. Having done the 3 Men in Black books, I get a lot of people contact me about their Men in Black experiences. And so for that reason, that brings in a lot of reports. As I said, I get a lot of reports, every week. But what I found when I wrote the first book I did on the Men in Black, called On the Trail of the Saucer Spies, back in 2006, what I found was that out of every sort of 20 or thereabouts Men in Black stories that would come in, I would get sort of 1 or 2 Women in Black accounts, which are, they're not totally unknown in ufology before. I mean, John Keel wrote about a number of cases back in the 60s, but there weren't many. So, in other words, although the book didn't take me long to write, it did actually take a few years to get enough material in to warrant writing a book, But again, it's just thanks to sort of people coming forward and allowing their stories to be told that I can sort of then research those same stories further and, kind of take it from there in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. And also, as I said, it's always important to me when I'm writing a book to do something that gives the reader value for money in terms of not having read on that subject before. So the Women in Black was an ideal subject because it never has been the subject of a book before. So.
Isn't that great? And it's important to bring people's attention to this and to have that, all of the stories written down, and it's something that other researchers can build upon. And I think that's a really important thing.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, that is one of the most important things about writing a book, is the fact that it creates feedback and brings other people forward, and it allows sort of the picture to be put together to a greater level, and so it's sort of like we're all working and succeeding together to get the information together and out there. People contact me with stories. I put the stories out there for people to see, brings other ones in. Somebody else picks up on it and they do their own research on this case, and it sort of all adds to it,
And that's wonderful. I mean, it's something that I never would have even thought of. I think we all have our own areas of interest and study. And then when I start talking to you about the Women in Black, I'm just like, wow, that is really fascinating. And some of the stories that you have in here, and in particular, one with Denise Stoner.
Oh, yeah, well, Denise's story is an interesting one. Denise Stoner is someone who's sort of well-known in ufology, and she did a good book with Kathleen Marden, which is one I recommend to people as well, an abduction book. And but Denise very kindly and generously let me use several of her stories in the book, and they're sort of classic encounters, sort of what most people would perceive as Men in Black type encounters, because they just simply didn't realize that there are Women in Black encounters. But I mean, one that's a particularly creepy story, which is also illustrated by a very good artist named Zachary Humway, who did some pictures for the book. And he did a painting, or piece of artwork, I should say, based around Denise's specific experience of what these 2 women in black who turned up at her doorstep one day looked like. And they're sort of very thin and gaunt and wearing the hair sort of in long and in bangs, but which kind of looked like a sort of very well done wig almost. But they had these solid black eyes, identical to the so-called black-eyed children as well. And they were just sort of repeatedly standing at the doorstep and ringing the doorbell. And it's like a lot of these cases that when they finally opened the door, there was no one there. It was like they'd vanished almost impossibly quickly. And what you find in so many of these cases, I think, is that the visit isn't necessarily to literally visit the person. It's to intimidate them and frighten them. You know, I think in some respects it actually does create more paranoia and fear on the part of the witness if they just get sort of vague, fragmentary sightings of these black-dressed women and men sort of hovering around, you know, the street or outside the house late at night, and then they simply vanish. That, I think, could probably sort of destabilize a lot of people purely and simply because they don't know what's going on. It's like they sort of, the men in black, the women in black, keep their distance sometimes, but they make sure they're seen. And you can imagine how that does make people probably feel a bit paranoid, to where eventually they're sort of peering through the spy hole on the door or through the blinds or whatever, worrying who's out there. And I think that's the goal of it. You know, if you can't silence the person, then plunge them into a state of fear and paranoia to where eventually they back away from the subject because they just can't handle everything that's going on.
So how do you kind of weed through, because I'm sure you get cases that are reports from people that are mentally unstable?
Well, I think in any field or any aspect of life, not necessarily just the paranormal, you do find people who may have, psychological issues or whatever. But what I always try and do is, if somebody contacts me and they send an email or a Facebook message, what I do is say, can I phone you? Can you give the phone number and call you up? And in a better scenario, you meet them in person. Now, whichever one it is, you can sort of get a good indication and a good vibe or a bad vibe, depending on who the person is and how they come across. I think anybody in this field, after a while of interviewing however many witnesses, you do become sort of a good judge of character and mindset and things like that. And so I think for that reason, or those reasons, you can tell when someone's being honest and truthful. And, I think the vast majority of everyone who's contacted me has done so because they legitimately want to share something that happened to them. But you're right, there is occasionally someone who wants to prank a photograph or, make up a story. That's just one of the hazards, but you've just got to be grounded and balanced and not get carried away because a story sounds really cool, but just look at it on its own merits and just see where it all goes.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think, when I first really started to investigate, I was much more apt back then to maybe, to maybe believe things, which, obviously as a good investigator, the belief shouldn't be in there at all. It has to be unbiased. But it is interesting learning to read people and to become a better detective, so to speak, and putting the pieces of the entire puzzle together, because then you really do get a big picture as to whether this is something that's serious or something that somebody that just maybe needs some attention is coming up with.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about things like the Women in Black stories I've got in the book, which is probably about 50 different stories altogether, is that unlike a lot of UFO encounters where, like with Roswell, there are dozens of people involved or, 30 people see a UFO flying over, whatever, the Women in Black and the Men in Black stories are very sort of personal, where the only person involved is the witness. That's how they turn up. They don't turn up to dozens of people. It's always to one. So, the case itself, as I said, is very important and personal to that one individual. And that's why I think these stories, for me at least, you can tell the credibility in them because the person is sort of traumatized, when they get these visits, because, unlike the movie versions like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, the real sort of Men in Black and Women in Black don't come across at all like government agents. they're sort of, the women and the men are sort of very pale-skinned. They often wear these large sunglasses, kind of almost like the goggles that a skier would wear. Not that big, but almost, where even the sides of the glasses are sort of blocked off.
Oh,
so
dear.
You're unable to see their eyes. And some people have said that as they've been close to them, they've been able to just sort of make the eyes out through the dark glass, and they're sort of very often bigger than normal and sort of this weird starey look, which one witness described as like mad dog eyes. And with the women, as I said, there are a lot of reports where, for whatever reason, they're wearing these long black wigs. Now, one of the theories that's been put forward is that they could be alien hybrids. So if you imagine, for the most part, the women in black tend to visit people late at night, and they've still got the sunglasses on, these huge sunglasses. They've got their hair usually in bangs. So in other words, it comes right down to just above their eyes and sort of folds in around their cheeks. So you can barely see the face. And they often wear sort of black outfits with the collars turned up, etc. I sometimes wonder if it really is a black wig. If you got rid of the black wig and the black sunglasses, and because they're so pale and have these larger eyes, they might look sort of really like a combination of us and the Greys, that's why the theories developed, that perhaps they're sort of alien human hybrids that are actually trying to infiltrate, in a sinister way, possibly, society. That whether there's, a black and white angle of good and bad aliens, I don't know. But the idea being that we could be dealing with dangerous crossbreeds, almost, if you like, that are trying with every successive generation to make them look more and more human, to the point where one day we won't know the difference. That's sort of a disturbing theory, but it might explain, as I said, the glasses, the wigs, the turned-up coats, and coming out at night, so they can pretty much stay in the shadows most of the time and not be seen for what they are.
So what would make somebody a target of the women in black or men in black?
Well, that's a good question, and the reason why it's a good question is because it's actually, the big problem we have is that there's no real pattern towards how and why they choose the people they do. I mean, most of the cases I've got in the book are where the person has had a significant encounter, whether a UFO sighting at close quarters or an abduction experience or a contactee type case, that sort of thing. But sometimes they turn up where somebody's just seen like a light in the sky, which could be a satellite going over, and there's nothing out of the ordinary or amazing about the case in the slightest. It's just down to the fact that it was just something they reported to the local press, maybe, and the local newspapers said, Mr. Smith saw a weird light 2 nights ago. Has anybody else seen it? But there's nothing to it, and people like that, though, have still got reports and visits from the men in black and the women in black. So that is sort of a puzzle as to why they would interview or visit those sorts of people. But for the most part, it's a case where there's been direct interaction with the phenomenon itself, beyond just a light in the sky. So.
Interesting. Are there any, what are the commonalities with some of these? Is there a specific place that they're, appearing, or a specific age group, or, you know what I mean?
Well, the women in black typically visit people at their homes, and it's always very late at night, sort of 10, 11 o'clock. I said they're always dressed in black, the black wigs, typically in bangs. And the weird thing is that, like the men in black, the women in black seem to have the ability to almost sort of control our minds, as strange as that sounds, because, if you're sitting at home on a Friday night, it's 11 o'clock and you hear 3 or 4 slow bangs on the front door, well, you're not going to fling the door open to see who it is, if it's midnight or whatever. At the very least, you're going to look through the spy hole. You might even call the police if you sort of see this strange woman dressed in black with sunglasses on at midnight outside your front door. But the weird thing is that most people, despite what they say afterwards, at the time, they do let them in. They open the door and they feel impelled or driven to invite them in. And of course, this parallels the old legends of vampires where, the first time a vampire can enter your home is when you invite it, and then after that, it can cross the threshold whenever it wants. So, I sometimes wonder, as an aside, if some of these old legends of vampires could be based on early, centuries-old women in black and men in black cases. But people feel as if their mind has been sort of subtly altered. They're in almost like an altered state, and they feel driven to open the door. So they open the door, let the women in black in, they sit down, then the woman in black would sort of sit opposite. And sometimes the conversations are really weird, where they'll ask questions about the UFO encounter, or they'll just come out right and threaten the person. And sometimes they sort of almost play with the people, but in like a tormenting fashion, just to sort of scare them. And they're always described as having this sort of weird look on their face, sort of like a malevolent kind of stare that, sort of oozes hatred of us. That's how a lot of people have described them, that they felt the women in black and the men in black hate us for whatever reason. And it sort of shows up, although they come across as emotionless, the emotionless look on the face actually, it's hard to describe, but it's like an emotionless sense of just malevolence, somehow like that. And people answer the questions, etc., etc., and then the men in black, the women in black, they get up and leave. And then sort of 10 minutes after they've left, the person's usually still sort of sitting on the couch. And it's like they're coming out of anesthetic, where their mind starts to clear and reality returns to normal. And then they start asking them, then they start getting in a panic, saying, why did I let them in? Why didn't I call the police? And they can't explain it other than that their mind was somehow plunged into like an altered state.
Wow. Is there ever, obviously you've got the story of the witness. Is there ever any evidence left behind or any way to kind of corroborate what the witness is telling you?
No, there actually isn't. We have got a few photographs of both women in black and men in black. But the problem is, people have said, well, it's a woman dressed in black, but does that make it a woman in black? A lot of my ex-girlfriends were women in black, but they were goth. They were goth.
Oh, dear.
They weren't women in black, you know what I mean? They were women in black, but they weren't women in black,
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the problems we have with the photos, is that, they look really kind of weird and creepy, but does that mean they're women in black? So, yes, there's some interesting evidence in that sense, and I talk about those photograph cases in the book. But other than that, it's almost proved to be impossible for the person to get anything. And I think the reason why is because however they do it, the women in black are able to affect the mindset of the person. So they specifically don't try and take a picture, or they don't try and steal, an item of clothing or the sunglasses or whatever. They just sit there. So it's as if the women in black have got the whole situation under control even before they knock on the front door, to ensure that nothing can go wrong. And I think that's why, we have this situation where it has proved impossible to get anything, because nothing is taking place in a normal state of mind.
Right. Kind of like, if you were to hear a lot of alien abduction cases, it's the same type of thing, except for the fact that people are usually asleep, not always, but that is quite curious.
Mm.
And that's
that's a good point. You can sort of look at it like that, and realize as to how these things are the ones that are always in control. And I think that's an important thing. When you don't have control of your own mind and your own body and your own common sense factors, then you're not going to do what you would normally think about doing. So again, it comes down to a situation where I think from my perspective at least, it comes down to a situation where it's very easy to understand why we don't have evidence, but it's not so easy to understand how the women in black are able to do this. How can they control people's minds? How can they control our common sense factors? I have no real answer for that other than the possibility that somehow they can directly influence the human mind, whether through psychic phenomena perhaps or something along those lines.
Are there other, electrical disturbances? Or is there a strange smell in the air? Is there any sort of, because to me, the paranormal UFOs, there's some similarities here with... yeah.
Well, actually, the point you just raised, they're all relative to the women in black. For example, when you talked about, like, odors, one of the creepiest stories I've got in the book came from a barman. He's actually the only person in the book who isn't listed by name, and he specifically asked for his name to be left out of the book, but he's the only one in the entire book. But he told me a couple of years ago he works as a barman, and it was just sort of 15 minutes before the bar was due to close at like 1:45, 2 a.m. And this man and a woman came in, and he said they looked really strange. Their skin was weird, their hair was weird, their sort of facial structure was strange, and they were wearing these sort of weird grins on their faces, kind of like the grinning man, if you've ever heard of that phenomenon. Just almost like disturbingly manic, and they started sort of essentially telling him all aspects of his life and all sorts of weird stuff, again, just to unnerve him, I think. And he was telling me how he used to work in a mortuary, and he said as these man and woman got close, the woman particularly because she was nearest him, he said she just sort of stunk of the odor of what you get in like a mortuary. And
that's really not pleasant.
No, and there are other issues, not just sort of odors, but people kind of get this very negative vibe. That's sort of one of the typical things, where that's all happened to all of us, where you meet somebody for the first time, don't know anything about them, the background, nothing, but you just get a feeling you don't like them, but you don't know why. But people get that all the time with the women in black, and so those are sort of the main things to look out for. I guess perhaps the most sinister of all, and I talk about this in the book as well, is that a number of people have been visited by the women in black or in close proximity to them have fallen sick in the immediate days afterwards, and sometimes with quite serious illnesses, almost as if they'd been sort of supernaturally infected, if you like. And when you mentioned electrical interferences, that's a classic one with not just the women in black, but the men in black. I've got countless cases where things like microwaves and refrigerators have suddenly gone out.
Oh my gosh, I want to talk about that when we get back from the break. We've got some great questions in chat, and we have somebody that's in chat that actually thinks you're very cute and have a great voice. I'm Erica Lukes. We're going to be back in a moment, so stick around.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified.
UFO classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Erica Lukes. Make sure you take a second and go to Facebook, UFO Classified, like it, and then you can find my website where I will be giving you all of my upcoming speaking engagements, posting relevant articles. One of these days I'm actually going to start blogging, which will be the seventh sign of the apocalypse, but I also have my upcoming guests on UFOclassified.com and all sorts of good stuff. My guest tonight has been on my show probably more than, well, I know you've been on the show more than anybody else, Nick. Are you excited about that fact?
So you broke up a little bit. Say that bit again.
You have been on my show more than anyone. It's very exciting.
Oh, cool.
I know.
Oh, that's good.
I know. That's because you're my. I mean, you just we have so much fun together, and you have so many cool things, and you're always doing new things, like your brand new book, Women in Black, which is available on Amazon. So if you all need to get a copy for sure, it's amazing. And when we left off, we were talking about how really frightening all of the occurrences with the women in black, men in black are, and how they really captivate somebody's mind, much like an alien abduction scenario. And there's a electrical disturbance described, microwaves, all of that stuff. I mean, it to me, it sounds just very similar, eerily similar to some sort of alien encounter or a paranormal encounter.
Well, they are, and I mean, sometimes, UFO cases cross over with the paranormal. There are examples where people have had a UFO encounter and then they've developed sort of significant psychic powers, things like that. I've got a couple of cases in the book I talk about where people had sort of women in black encounters, and then afterwards they've had violent poltergeist activity in the home. And there's no way to sort of really... Well, there's no way at all to sort of explain that away as, agents of some government agency. That's just not feasible. And, of course, the way they look as well. So whatever they are, they're outside of government or anything like that. And, of course, the big question is, what are they? And, I mean, in the book, I talk about all the different theories, everything from aliens to alien hybrids to time travelers to something paranormal. There's multiple different theories for what these things are, but what we can say for sure is that they're definitely tied to the UFO subject. But as I also point out in the book, there are people who have been visited by the women in black, and it's clearly the same types, but where they've been investigating like weird creatures like Bigfoot. And in the UK, we get these reports of what are known as alien big cats, or ABCs, where people report every year hundreds of like large black cats, the sort of size of mountain lions, and there should not be anything like that living wild in the UK at all. The biggest thing we have that's wild and running around in the UK is the English fox, which is still a fairly small animal, and they're very timid and shy. But what's weird is that people who've investigated and seen some of these black cats, they've been visited by the women in black as well. So, it sort of crosses over into the field of cryptozoology, never mind just ufology.
Wow, that's interesting. And you mentioned the large black cats, and that reminds me of kind of some of the sightings that you see up at Skinwalker Ranch, or that you hear about.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's actually some quite interesting parallels. I mean, with the Skinwalker Ranch, you have black cats and UFO activity and animal mutilations and all sorts of stuff. And again, I've got a case in the book involving a friend of mine named Nigel Wright. Nigel lives in England, and he was investigating a 1997 animal mutilation case as it happened. It was actually the mutilation of a whale which was washed up on a southwest England coastline on the beach, and it had these strange excisions on the skin, which clearly hadn't been done like by the rudder of a boat or any other animals. They were sort of perfect circles. And he started looking into this, and then one day when he was at the local library, his wife Sue got a visit from this woman who wasn't a woman in black, but she was dressed completely in white. And I've got several women in white stories in the book. Never dated a woman in white, but that's beside the point. But
well, there's a shocker.
But this woman in white, she had like a long sort of white jacket, white pants, and you know how those sort of almost like a skull cap type things that the women used to wear in like the 1930s. You know what I mean? Those tightly fitting skull caps that they used to wear to go out, that kind of thing. She was wearing one of those and thick black sunglasses and very, very pale. And she told Sue, Nigel's wife, that basically to leave all this stuff alone. And Sue sort of stood on the doorstep, not knowing what to do, as the woman walked down the drive, went through the gate and left. And again, it was only a minute or two later that Sue suddenly felt, I've got to see where she went. So she ran to the edge of the drive, and there was no one there. Again, it was as if her sort of common sense factors had been sort of glitched for a while. Mm-hmm. So, we've got connections between the women in black in relation to UFOs, to large black cats, to Bigfoot sightings, to animal mutilations. It's almost across the board in terms of the paranormal. The only thing I haven't really seen them turn up in is in relation to ghostly encounters or anything like that. Now, I've got some cases where the people have been visited by the women in black, and afterwards they got sort of midnight, early hours of the morning visits from the so-called shadow people, as they're known, which a lot of your listeners may have heard of, these sort of shadowy, silhouetted figures that turn up in people's bedrooms mainly late at night in the early hours. And its typical situation is a person wakes up, or they're semi-awake, and they can't move. It's like they're paralyzed, and there's this malevolent, shadowy silhouette of a human looming over them. And sometimes, if it's a man, it's wearing a fedora, but not always. But it's not like a substantial figure. As I said, it's like a smoky, shadowy figure. And I've got a few cases like that where people have had like a follow-up visit, if that's the right term. They've been visited by the women in black, and then they've had a shadow person visitation afterwards.
Oh, wow. So that's the intriguing thing about all of this. And it always kind of shocks me that investigators are so quick to say that I'm only study the UFO field, or I only study, this or that. And there are way too many blurry lines here. And you really have to know a little bit about everything.
Well, you do. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, there's a real UFO phenomenon, but I've always been quite open-minded on, is it extraterrestrial? Is it interdimensional? Is it multidimensional? Is it paranormal? I don't know. And I try not to put labels on things because I think the important thing is that rather than uphold a specific belief system, we should just go with the evidence and see where the evidence leads. And that's what I've always tried to do with the UFO subject. And I think certainly the one person more than any other who influenced me to follow this path of realizing that there's a lot of these phenomena are interlinked was probably John Keel, most well known for his book The Mothman Prophecies, which is this year actually, in just a month or two, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first Mothman sighting, and I'll be speaking at the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant in September of this year.
And that is so cool. They love you there.
Yeah, I like going to that conference. It's a good one. But it's not really a conference. It's a festival out in the streets where they close the streets down, and there's like thousands of people walking around, and there's, you know, bands playing, and people selling Mothman T-shirts and fridge magnets, you know, and homemade stuff they've made, and you know, all kind of cool stuff. And but yeah, I think Keel's work demonstrated to me that a lot of these phenomena are interlinked, even if we're not sure why. And I found that a lot in ufology, that when you go looking, you do find it's not just straightforward that somebody saw a nuts and bolts UFO and was abducted. You very often find that these people have weird synchronicities afterwards, or they, like I said earlier, they develop like a psychic senses, that kind of thing, or they get weird poltergeist activity in the home. You know, a photograph on a table flies off or something like that, you know, onto the floor, as if some sort of residual energy has been left behind, you know, after the woman in black has left. So, you know, I think it's important to remain open-minded on what the phenomenon is. You know, we can all agree there's a phenomenon, but what it is, you know, I think to a degree at least, we're still struggling to figure out some of these sort of rogue aspects, if you like, of the different cases.
That's true. I mean, I know that you're the kind of person that is incredibly secure and doesn't really care what anybody thinks, but have you encountered any critics of the Woman in Black stuff?
Not so much of the stories. A few people have sort of rolled their eyes at the fact that, you know, it's taking it away from pure nuts and bolts ufology. And, you know, I point out to people when they come up with this approach that the most important people in the UFO subject are the witnesses, because without the witnesses, we've got nothing to go on. And it's the witnesses, not me, that's, you know, telling these stories about the weirder aspects of whether it's UFOs or the weirder aspects of things like the Bigfoot mystery. You know, a lot of stories where people have seen Bigfoot sort of vanish in a flash of light or fade away as if it's sort of just gone through some portal or whatever. And a lot of cryptozoologists won't touch those stories. You know, they just say, oh, well, the witness was either out of their mind, drunk, wasted, or lying, or mistaken. They will not sort of entertain the idea that it could have been real. Now, I am willing to look at the idea that it was real because the witness was there and the person who said it's all nonsense wasn't there. So, yeah, I mean, I always sort of stand up and say, hey, look, you know, this is what the witness said. We need to take the witness seriously, not put our own personal spin on it. So there's been a couple of things like that, but it hasn't been so much because of the account. It's because the person is so sort of insecure about themselves, I think, that anything that even vaguely criticizes their belief system, they feel they've got to lash out. But that actually says less about the subject, and it says more about their weaknesses and their insecurities. You know, if they can't stand somebody coming up with a different concept or idea, then, you know, they need to get thicker skin.
I am going to quote you on that. Because I love that. I love that attitude that you have. And I think we all should have that. And I think that we also need to definitely understand that this shouldn't be an ego-driven thing. And unfortunately, in my short time in a public role in this, I have definitely noticed it's a lot of chest pounding, a lot of ego-driven crap. You know, I've got to be right, and I've got to say that this isn't a UFO, and I'm going to blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, you know, you're coming into this with a bias. B, if you just wanted to spout off and you know.
Well, you know, but I totally understand what you mean, and I think it's important that, particularly if you're speaking at conferences and you're in sort of the public domain, so to speak, then you should be sort of strong enough to get your own view across without having to feel you've got to toe the line. I mean, I can tell you some sort of, you know, horror stories, behind-the-scenes stories, where certain people who I know believe some of this weirder stuff. They won't talk about it because they're worried they won't be booked for certain more mainstream UFO conferences, which I won't name, but where it's very much nuts and bolts, but they've had sort of themselves weird synchronicities and strange things happen, but they're fearful that if they talk about that, it's not going to go down with an audience for that particular organisation, and so they don't talk about it, which, is totally wrong. And slightly off topic, but I mean, I could tell you horror stories about people who just total loathing of their audience. I had a big, almost fist fight with one guy once, saying, look, these people who come to this conference, they're buying your books. Show them some respect, sign some autographs, or sign all the autographs that people want throughout the night, because, you're only able to give you a lecture because people have bought your books and have been good enough to come along to the event. Show some respect. And he was like, well, and he said, I've been signing autographs for 30 minutes. I said, well, if you're going to sign them for another 30 minutes, people have come along to see you, And I see that a lot, where they sort of roll their eyes, they want to get into their little groups and vanish, and for me, like I said, I think we're all on the same level. We're all looking for answers, and for me, I like to go to conferences, and if there's 50 people who want autographs, I don't sign those 50 autographs because it's required to do it. I do it because I enjoy doing it and hanging out with everybody and sharing information and, making new friends. And it's a social scene as much as it is about learning things. But these people who just, sort of take the approach that, well, I've signed 20 autographs, that was what I allocated in my contract, 10 minutes, and now I'm gone. Those people, they need, they need sort of, I don't know, they need the jaws sort of breaking.
Yeah, and I will have to ask you off air who you're referring to. I mean, because it is really.
Oh, I know of people. You think I'm making this up, but I'm not. I know of people who have it locked into their contract that they won't fly before 7 a.m. because it means they've got to get out of bed early.
Well, and do they like the green M&Ms taken out of their little M&M pile too?
I mean, when they say to me, what do you want? I say, well, what have you got? But no, I mean, I ask for, I say, as long as I've got a hotel room. Well, actually, I don't even ask for a hotel room. Sometimes conference organisers, particularly new ones, they're struggling and they're new to the subject, and they might not have much of a budget. So I'm happy to say, if your budget's low, well, I'll crash in, your second bedroom or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. You get to hang out with people. I mean, I don't see the point of sitting in a hotel room on your own at sort of 10 o'clock when the conference is going to start tomorrow morning. All you're doing is channel flipping. You might as well hang out and do something. So, but for the most part, I think most people in the subject do know how to sort of treat their audience and themselves, but there are some that are just total asses, that it amazes me that people ever book them. But then the reason why they book them is because when you're a speaker and you hang out with these people, then you see that unfortunate side come through sometimes. Now, obviously, it's not the majority, it's actually the minority, but it's like any situation like this, you remember the bad side of the minority, you know what I mean? It sticks in your mind and leaves sort of a bad taste. So
yeah, and that is interesting. And you do this so much that I'm sure you see a lot of behind the scenes things that are quite interesting. And just from my time going to conferences and I mean, I love to kind of hang back and then just look at people and look at their interactions and look at the way they come across. And I mean, there are people that are on the circuit that are very, I mean, they've got their groupies and they've got people that just kind of, I mean, not that you don't. Oh, yeah, okay. Especially when they wear black.
They can't wear with respect.
I know, but I mean, it is interesting. I mean, there's kind of, I think when you're in any field, you kind of obtain this cult status, and I don't think that that's necessarily the best thing. I mean, my goal in life isn't to be, somebody who just is, becoming a celebrity and not adding value to what I'm doing. I mean, I want to make a huge change and a difference in what I'm doing. And it's, I think you do too. I know you do. And I know that you're also very connected with people when you go out there. You do sit and talk to people, and you genuinely care, and that comes across.
Oh, well, thanks. But you're right. I think we should all sort of strive to recognize that, whether it's the audience listening or watching, whether it's yourself with your radio show, me writing the books, somebody else, does a podcast or whatever, we're all sort of in it. Well, the way I look at it, at least, we're all in it together to get the answers. It's not sort of I'm an author, so I'm one of these, No, we should all be in it together. And I think for the most part we are. That's why, most of the conferences I go to, you can sort of do your lecture, then you do a Q&A, sign some books, you have dinner, and then you hang out in the bar together. Everybody has a good time. And I think that's important. So I think a lot of, well, not a lot, but certain people in the subject, they view it very much as cold and black and white. I'm flying in, I'm doing the lecture, 20 minutes autographs, thank you very much, goodbye. That sort of thing, which is not the way to do it.
No, I mean, it definitely isn't. And I don't know. I just hope that people out there, I think that everybody that I come in contact with, they genuinely have had experiences and they want to learn about this. And now I hope that I can kind of steer them in the right direction and give them good, credible things to look at instead of maybe just, I mean, sometimes there are people out there that get these rock and roll kind of the superstar status in this field, and they go on a lot of fluff. And then when you really dig into their work, it's not necessarily all that you maybe thought it was. And so
I also kind of object to where people, for years and years running, it's pretty much the same lecture. I do a lot of conferences, and I'm mindful of the fact that I speak often at the same conferences. So you want to sort of not just slightly alter your lecture, you want to give a completely different lecture each time, because your audience may well be the same audience if it's like the same area of the country or whatever. So I think that's an important thing to remember as well, is that if you're going to keep staying on the lecture circuit here and there, you've got to vary your lectures. And some people's lectures, I mean, I could give their lectures because I know it off by heart, because they give it all the time,
Jeez.
And that's something to try and avoid as well, really.
Oh, that's too bad. And we wonder why we're not encouraging a younger generation, because it's just the same old kind of drivel. And we need some new blood. And that's what I love about you. You always do different. You're always talking about something different or writing about something different, and you're connected to people. And I really appreciate that about you. And that's why you've been a guest so much on the show. I'm just, I really mean that. So we are going to get ready. We've got our last break coming up. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, and make sure you like UFO Classified. Restricted Airspace is coming up next. We will catch you after this last break.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
3 guys, no ties.
I'm sick of this mess. We need new black leaders. We need black leaders like Martin Luther King. I'm sick of it. Al Sharpton, racist. And notice who he voting for, Hillary Clinton. That says a lot about him. They doing more harm than they is good. And Black Lives Matter is a cult. Oh, I'm rolling on through here today, baby. All lives matter.
3 guys, no ties. Wednesday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific. Right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Bowl for Life is a non-profit organization founded in 2013 by Chuck Gardner with one simple goal: to grow the sport of bowling worldwide. Over the years, Bowl for Life has given out thousands of dollars in scholarships to youth bowlers around the world. Our focus is to nurture integrity, honesty, professionalism, as well as respect into bowlers both young and old. You can help us by going to bowlforlife.com. Even the smallest donation goes a long way to breaking down the barriers and helping us assist people of all ages to improve their skills as well as knowledge of the game. Bowl for Life is happy to be partnered with other great organizations like the Youth Education Services Fund, as well as the United States Bowling Congress, with many spectacular integrated events planned in the near future. To learn more, go to bowlforlife.com. That's bowlforlife.com.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about. At least, not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, for Hyperspace, the one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride?
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Erica Lukes. Very obviously, this is UFO Classified. I'm happy to be here, and thank you all for tuning in. I am here with one of my favorite people in this field, Nick Redfern, who always has something fun to say and very educational. And his new book is available on Amazon. All of his books are, and you should really start adding all of them to your collection because they are worthwhile. A lot of great research. The new book is Women in Black, The Creepy Companions of the Mysterious Men in Black. And Nick, I just am amazed at how really disturbing these sightings are for people, these encounters, and how much they parallel so many other types of phenomenon.
Well, yeah, I mean, one that really sort of springs to mind is a 1971 case I've got in the book from a woman named Shirley Cromartie. Shirley Cromartie was somebody who actually worked in the President Richard Nixon administration in the early 70s before he was forced to resign because of the Watergate scandal. And Shirley Cromartie had this weird experience. She was based out of the Florida. There's like a Florida equivalent of the White House. It's sort of like a getaway place, you know, for the president to hang out. And she had this weird experience with this woman in black and who had sort of the black sunglasses and the black wig, who suddenly came up to her one day in like a parking area and like sort of sprayed her with this weird liquid that smelled like jasmine. And it turns out, or I say it turns out, it's almost certainly the case that it was actually a psychedelic substance which comes from a particular plant in South America, which is known as the devil's breath. And it makes a person sort of lose control of their mental faculties. And there have been some very weird cases where people have been sprayed with it, and the person who's done it has basically said, you know, take me to your bank and empty your bank account out and give me the money. And people have done it. That's the sort of state of mind, or the altered state of mind it puts a person into. And but now whether or not we can apply that situation here, I don't know. But the woman, in relation to the story, was very weird looking and creepy looking, and John Keel himself looked into this case, and he mentioned it in the Mothman Prophecies, and he felt that because Shirley Cromartie was in the employ of the Nixon administration, he felt that it was actually sort of like a show of power to sort of subtly or less than subtly get across to the president that, hey, you know, we can infiltrate the White House. You know, essentially that was sort of the approach that John Keel felt, that, you know, he essentially saying no one's safe. If the president's safe, not safe, no one's safe, you know.
Wow. My gosh. And where, you know, when you're researching your, you know, the women in black or men in black or Bigfoot, whatever you're researching, I mean, how do you know? Because there's so many places you could go with your research. I mean, do you just let it take you there, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I don't try and force the evidence to fit anything, because again, that's sort of, if you start doing that, then you sort of become more belief driven, and it's also the wrong way to do it. I just go where the evidence goes and present it, and sometimes, you know, there's a conclusion where we can say for sure what happened. Other times we're left totally baffled because either there's not enough data, or the case is so downright weird, you know, that it becomes almost impossible to sort of say anything about it. But in saying that, you know, I think as long as we keep trying and pushing for answers, you know, we're going to get them. I mean, certainly some of the weirder cases that I've looked into, and there's 2 chapters on this particular subject in the book, where we don't have a hard answer, and it's difficult to know where to go with them, but they're very weird, is the saga of what are known as phantom social workers, or bogus social workers. And it's predominantly, but not exclusively, predominantly a British phenomenon, where going back to the 80s, 1980s, there were reports of women in sort of black outfits, and again very pale and wearing wigs, turning up on people's doorsteps, very quickly flashing an ID card and saying we're from social services, and there's been complaints of like physical abuse to the children or the, you know, newborn baby in the house. And of course the parents are terrified. You know, it's like the police are turning up, and you know, they've intimated that they need to take the baby away for inspection, that kind of thing. And then, you know, they start asking weird questions of the family as well, and that's when sometimes, you know, the mother or the father or whoever's there has essentially said, let me see that ID card again, you know, and then they back away and leave quickly. But there are a lot of these really weird cases from the UK of women in black trying to steal babies. And one of the things I found was I went back, well, actually through a friend of mine, Neil Arnold, in the UK, who's done a lot of research into centuries-old women in black stories. Neil found a bunch of newspaper reports from the US, Canada, and the UK from the 1800s, where, again, women in black had turned up at people's homes and had stolen babies, one pretending to be a midwife at the birth of a baby. And in this particular case, one of the local police officers asked her, you know, what did this woman look like? And he said, the woman said, well, she was sort of dressed in this long black dress with a long black cloak, and she had this strange hair and a white skin. this is just like the women in black today. The women in black 130, 150 years ago trying to steal babies who were mentioned in the newspapers of that era are just like the women in black who have been doing that or trying to do that in the 1980s and 90s in the UK. The most recent UK case I've got in the book, I think, is either 2012 or 2014. I forget now, but that's like really creepy and weird. These pale women dressed in black going around and trying to steal babies. It's that sort of takes it in sort of a really sort of definitively disturbing area. Hello?
Sorry about that. How close does the demonic, do you think that there's a demonic element to this?
Well, some people do. I guess it's sort of, it's sort of like you look at how much of a leap is it between paranormal stuff and demonic, By paranormal, people have talked about, as I said, sort of like poltergeist activity in the home, or they've fallen sick, or the electrical equipment starts to short out, like specifically things like the microwave or the refrigerator or the toaster or whatever. But it's 3 or 4 things has all happened at once, as if there is some sort of negative energy in the home. So it is only a short step away from where some people have said, I know people who've said to me, and who are some of the people I interviewed for the book, who do personally believe that what they encountered was something demonic, like a demonic entity masquerading as a woman, if you like, and for whatever reason, to get their grips into us, to manipulate us, to enslave us, who knows? But that is actually one of the most popular theories, not just for the women in black, but for the men in black, that they're sort of not just a demonic entity, but perhaps almost like a shape-shifting entity that can take on different forms. Somebody sees a man in black, somebody sees a woman in black, somebody sees a black-eyed child, somebody sees a shadow person, somebody sees a hat man, which is another similar one. Maybe we've never really seen them in their real form, if they can sort of literally manipulate the way they appear to us. So, so I can understand why some people do go down this demonic path when, a case has everything like poltergeist activity and like this menacing atmosphere hanging over the house and things going wrong and, stuff like that. It does create that sort of unsettling vibe.
It doesn't. It is interesting because I noticed that, today I was just reading, in fact, a post about the UFO demon connection. And to me, I don't have enough evidence to go there. I think that, that you hear things on both sides of the fence. You've got the good, benevolent beings that are here to usher in love and light, and then you've got the kind of the Carla Turner aspect of things, where it's this we need to be deathly afraid of things. And I think that until I have evidence either way, and until some really good research is done, it's hard to jump into either of those aspects.
Well, that's actually a good approach to take, because that's what I do. It's like with the stories in the book where people think it's demonic, I presented it from the perspective of saying, this is what John Smith believes and how and why he believes it, rather than writing it, I should say, in a fashion which endorses it. I think the important thing is to, if you get across to the reader that you're sharing the thoughts and ideas of the witness, that's totally fine. And I think that's an important thing to do, is not to try and force it to fit your own beliefs, or even don't write it to where it looks like you're endorsing it if you're not, but be respectful to the person who is endorsing it and say this is why they believe it. And then that allows the reader a totally impartial and open way of reading the story without feeling they're being lectured to,
Yeah, and I think that it's just important when we're doing research to leave that I think it's a great approach, because too many times we kind of lead with our emotion and our own belief systems, and that has nothing to do with the data.
No, you're right. But I mean, the important thing, I think, why these stories sort of, proliferate about the demonic angle is because legitimately weird things do happen. As I said, people have been using Ouija boards, have sort of woken up in the middle of the night and seen women in black, like 24 hours later, looking over the bed. Albert Bender, the man who kicked off the whole Men in Black mystery in the early 50s, he was heavily involved in the world of the occult. Sort of the really dark stuff, sort of trying to summon up supernatural entities using ancient rituals and things like that. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he sort of opened a door to the Men in Black and sort of led them through. Now, does that mean it's demonic, or does it mean there could be multiple dimensions around us that if you know how to access them or open them, you can allow things to come through? One person's demon, based on belief systems, could be somebody else's multi-dimensional entity. You see what I mean? And,
right, yeah.
And over the centuries, belief systems, one religion says they're demons, a UFO researcher or a paranormal researcher says, no, they're a supernatural entity that coexists with ours, and if we could find how to break the portal, we could enter their realm of existence. And maybe they hate us as much as, a traditional story of a demon hates us. And maybe that's how the stories of demons surfaced, or maybe they really are demons, So there's a lot to sort of think about. That's one of the things about a lot of the Women in Black stories. They make you think as to what's going on in ufology. It's not like a straightforward nuts and bolts UFO crashed and alien bodies were found. It sort of does challenge you to think about a lot of things that a lot of people would say have nothing to do with ufology, but they clearly do have.
Well, and I think that's good. And for me, it's been a little frustrating in and of the fact that, everybody expects the UFO thing to be a nuts and bolts thing.
Yeah.
And all these investigators and researchers are waiting for the next big sighting when they've got all of this trace evidence and all of this stuff. But you are, in my opinion, when you wait for that nuts and bolts craft, that's not what we're dealing with. That's not what we're looking at. And we have to look at the bigger picture. And so I love it. I love all of these. I love what you've done with the Women in Black and all of your research, because you're taking the most important thing, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, the witness testimony, the report, and you're giving that to us so we can look at the broader picture of what's going on.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that, Erica. Thank you. And that's I think, if we're honest with ourselves, that's all we can do until we've got the answers, is to put it all out, and that's why in the Women in Black book, I've got cases of Women in Black turning up in UFO reports, the stolen baby angle, weird creatures like the black cats and other strange animals and monsters. Even in regards to the ancient mystery of alchemy, they turn up in relation to that as well. Time travel, the couple of chapters in the book on time travel as a theory for the Women in Black, and, as a byproduct as well, it crosses over into the Men in Black. And, and one of the fortunate things is, since the book was officially released on July the 1st, I've probably got another 20 or so reports already come in. And what's interesting is that they parallel the ones in the book, sort of in terms of the appearance of the Women in Black and how they look, but also, some of these issues about how people felt sick and ill when in their presence. They just kind of felt like they were going to throw up almost. And the after effects as well. So that's kind of encouraging when that happens. You get feedback that suggests more to the pattern. We may not understand the nature of the pattern, but we're seeing that there is a pattern developing.
And that's good. And I think, too, it's making people feel comfortable to talk about their incredibly bizarre experiences. And you know, to me, when I'm researching UFO cases and talking to witnesses, I mean, that's the big thing. It's like this sigh of relief that after 40 years they can talk about something and they don't feel judged. And I think that's a really powerful thing to do in that respect, too.
No, you're right, and I think, you know, all that demonstrates is that there's a very positive aspect to the UFO phenomenon in terms of why it's valuable to sort of look into it, and well, not just look into it, but I mean investigate it to the best of our abilities, and you know, see where it all leads. And I mean, who knows, if it may be that we can't even comprehend where it does lead. I mean, there are some really weird aspects to it, and I think that could also explain some of the official secrecy that, you know, if, say, for example, all that the government, well, I say the government, that's a wrong term to use, because I don't think the US government as like an entity is hiding the truth of UFOs. I honestly think it is like one of these, as I said earlier, these special access programs, as SAPs as they're called, that are buried so deep, you know, that even the director of this agency or that agency may know absolutely nothing about them, you know. But what I do think is that if all that it was that, you know, aliens crashed at Roswell, okay, we didn't tell the truth at the time, and then it became harder and harder to tell people. But yes, we've got sort of 4 or 5 bodies which we've kept in storage for X number of years, and here's the wreckage, and we can put it all, you know, on show so everybody can finally see it or whatever. If that's all it was, I think there's a good chance we might have been told. But it's these weirder aspects that lead me to believe that whatever this special access program is, they actually aren't hiding everything they know. They're hiding the fact that there's a huge amount they don't know.
Exactly.
You know, we expect agencies to know everything because, well, it's the government. But
exactly. And that would expose a lot of vulnerabilities. You know?
And I think on top of that, if they don't have all the answers, and I'm sure they've had the same sort of conversations that we've had tonight, you know, where one person in the special access program says, I think it's extraterrestrial, and somebody else says, no, I think it's demonic. I could easily see how that could happen behind the scenes. And so, because they don't know, they've taken the best approach from their perspective, which is to say nothing. I mean, to me, one of the most important UFO books ever was Whitley Strieber's Communion, because it wasn't just another book on abductions. Yes, the theme was abductions, but Whitley was talking about things that went far beyond that, about how these entities could supposedly extract and manipulate the human soul, and they told him that they could recycle souls and all sorts of strange, disturbing stuff. Now, granted, it's hypothetical, but if that special access program has got data or evidence which leads them to suspect that the greys are somehow connected to the human soul and the afterlife, I actually would feel and could feel sympathy for them for not knowing how to tell the world that it's not just nuts and bolts UFOs. These things, in a way we don't understand,
right,
are deeply connected to the afterlife and the soul. I don't see, as much as I want the truth to come out, I don't see how one of these special access programs could actually say that in front of the world and not have everybody plunged into sort of a state of fear, you know.
Exactly. And that's
about aliens who crashed, and it's actually something that's more bizarre than aliens, and they're manipulating human souls. You know, it's like the story nobody wants to tell.
Yeah, and I think that there will be much more, and I think that you're right. They just don't know how to handle it. And we've got to get ready to wrap it up, but I've got a question I want to ask you first that I have in chat. How are we going to get the younger generation involved?
Well, I think there's several ways. One would be to demonstrate to them that this is an important issue. And I think sometimes, you know, the subject, when we're sharing information, it's very hard data and facts, etc. It can sometimes become, you know, particularly if you're a kid, you know, it can become a bit boring. You know what I mean? It's like, it needs to be sort of...
Yeah.
There needs to be more excitement. I don't mean turn it into like a circus, but
no, but you need to
engage
more, people, and that's
it's got to be entertaining rather than just reeling off statistics of how many people have seen triangular-shaped UFOs. That's not going to bring new people in. Giving them visuals, making it very. Sharp and to the point, and then moving on to this, and moving on to that, bang, 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 that kind of thing in terms of sharing information.
Absolutely.
I think that would help. So I think the problem that what ufology does today, for the most part, and even I have to admit as a lecturer that it's a problem, is that we very much sort of, it's like, that whole phrase, you preach to the converted. We talk to each other.
Exactly.
But we don't very often talk outside
people.
of each other.
Yes,
so I think it's got to be made more immediate and entertaining. I don't mean entertaining at the expense of the facts, but you've got to entertain people as well. And I think those are the ways to get younger people in, I think.
And that's great. And so where are you going to be speaking next so people can hear you?
Well, the first weekend in August, I'll be at the Dogman Festival in Defiance, Ohio. The Dogman is like a werewolf-type creature, so I'm speaking at a conference which is essentially looking at the phenomenon of werewolves and these strange creatures that look like werewolves. Then 3 days after that, I'll be speaking in Rochester, New York, on the Women in Black and the Men in Black for the local paranormal UFO group in Rochester.
Oh, that is so
2 days
cool.
after that, I'll be speaking in Edinburgh, Texas. On the
okay, I thought you were going
to
say Edinburgh of Scotland, but
no,
Texas
sorry.
is good.
Then a couple of days after that, I'll be, where will I be? Oh, I'll be at the Los Angeles Paranormal Society it's the second Tuesday in August. Then the third Tuesday, I'll be at the local MUFON.
Okay,
and
group. this is
I've got
listed
like 5
on
lectures in 10 days in the first 2 weeks
You're an
of
animal.
August.
And we've got like 30 seconds left, but everyone can find your schedule on your fabulous blog.
Yeah.
So give us your blog.
All right, Nick Redfern, Fortean, Fortean, Nick Redfern, Fortean.blogspot.com, or they can hit me up at Facebook or Twitter. My Twitter is Nick Redfern UFO.
Great.
If you go to Facebook, there's quite a few Nick Redferns, but I'm the one with the bandana.
Oh, groovy. Thanks for joining me tonight, everyone. Next week, I've got Karen Gresham-Nickel, who will be here, and she's a clairvoyant and a certified clinical hypnotherapist. She is amazing. She'll be speaking with me at Starworks. Make sure you stick around for Universal Child, Restricted Airspace, and Hyperspace. It'll be a great night on KCOR. Have a safe weekend, and we will catch you next Friday.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio